I want to share something with all of you today that I have realized is extremely important.
The European Union has long relied on sea deliveries to receive the bulk of its Russian oil imports.
India has abstained in UN votes to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it's trying to balance its economic and political interests in the region.
You may have heard that Europe has sanctioned Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, which has sparked a crisis and chaos in the region. You may have also heard that Europe has been urging other countries to join them in isolating Russia and starving it of its oil money, which are the main sources of its power and aggression. But what you may not have heard is that Europe is still buying Russian oil and gas either directly or through India, which has been scoring Russian oil at cheap prices. Yes, this is the reality. Europe is not only betraying its own values of democracy, human rights and the rule of law, but also lying to you and the rest of the world about its true intentions. Europe is only imposing sanctions that do not hurt its own interest, while denying the freedom and choice that exists for other oil-hungry developing countries like India. So in today's video, I will expose the shocking reality of Europe's hypocrisy on this topic and show you how it is lying to you with its fake moral superiority, and how some European countries are secretly financing Russia's war machine by buying Russian oil through third countries, and most importantly, how is India profiting from this opportunity and what are the risks associated with it. And I will also share with you certain facts and data that will blow your mind and make you rethink your trust in Europe. But before I do that, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this issue? Do you agree or disagree with Europe's actions? Please leave your comments below and let me know your opinion. And if you want to know more about this topic and want to know what's India's take on it, then watch the video till the end. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe. Hello and namaste everyone, I'm Shahana and I welcome you to this awesome video. Let me take you back in time to where it all began way back in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea, a peninsula in the Black Sea that belonged to Ukraine. This sparked a major crisis in Europe and the world as many countries condemned Russia's actions as illegal and aggressive and sanctioned it. And again in 2022, the European Union has sanctioned more than 1,000 Russian individuals and businesses, as well as banned imports of Russian oil brought in by sea from December and all imports of refined oil products from Russia from February 2023. Maybe many of you may not know what sanctions really are or why they are imposed. Sanctions are penalties imposed by one country on another to stop them from acting aggressively or breaking international law. They are among the toughest actions nations can take. The aim of the economic sanctions was to impose severe consequences on Russia for its actions and to effectively prevent Russian abilities to continue the aggression. But they resulted in a complete failure. And if you don't trust me, then look at these reports. Exposing Europe's hypocrisy, titled The Laundromat: How the Price Cap Collision Whitewashes Russian Oil in Third Countries, a report by Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. This research made headlines around the world and led to serious concerns about Europe. What does this report say? Some of the most important laundromat countries like China, India, Turkey and the UAE, they buy cheap Russian crude oil, refine it and sell the processed goods to Europe. These are called laundromat countries, where the product origin has now changed and becomes a lawful way of exporting oil products to countries imposing sanctions on Russia. That's insane. This method provides funds for Putin's war bank. Kepler Analytics released yet another report. India becomes Europe's largest supplier of refined fuels. According to this report, Europe's refined petroleum imports from India are expected to exceed 360,000 barrels per day, beating Saudi Arabia and Iran. These reports clearly show that Europe is not serious about cutting off Russia's lifeline and is only imposing sanctions that do not hurt its own interest. You might be wondering why Europe is so desperate to get natural gas from anywhere but Russia. Well, let me tell you a story of betrayal, hypocrisy and greed. Europe depends on Russia for most of its gas needs, which gives Moscow a huge power over Europe's politics and security. Russia knows this and has used its gas weapon to bully and blackmail Europe many times, especially after it invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. Europe wants to break free from Russia's grip, but it's not easy. It has tried to find other sources of gas, such as liquefied natural gas from the US, Qatar and Australia, or pipelines from Azerbaijan Azerbaijan and Turkey, or even Norway and Denmark. But these options are not enough to satisfy Europe's growing thirst for gas, and they are also more costly and less reliable than Russian gas. So what does Europe do? It plays a dirty game of buying Russian oil indirectly through India, while pretending to be a champion of democracy and human rights. Yes, you heard that right. India has become Europe's largest supplier of refined fuels after the EU banned Russian oil products imports. But guess where India gets most of its crude oil from? That's right, Russia. So Europe is basically getting Russian oil through a backdoor while criticizing India for doing the same thing. How hypocritical is that? Therefore, you need to understand this, how Europe is secretly funding Russia's war machine by buying Russian oil through third countries. First, it allows Russia to maintain its oil imports and revenues despite the sanctions imposed by the EU and other countries. Russia earns billions of dollars from selling its crude oil to laundromat countries. Russia also benefits from selling its oil at lower prices than the global benchmark Brent crude, which makes it more competitive and attractive to buyers. On the other hand, the practice also exposes Russia to some risk and cost. Russia loses some of its market share and influence in Europe, which was its largest customer before the sanctions. Russia also faces high transportation and refining costs as it has to ship its oil to distant destinations and rely on third parties to process it. But I should tell you that despite losing its market in Europe, it has found new players, as I mentioned above, and India is playing a big role in this game. Meanwhile, how it is proving to be a win-win situation for India? Let me explain you with this graph. India's refiners boosted exports of diesel and jet fuel to Europe to about 2 lakh barrels per day after the European Union banned Russian oil product imports in February. This was an increase from an average of 1,54,000 barrels per day before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Diesel accounted for about 75% of the total exports, while jet fuel made up the rest. The benefits of this trade for India are, first of all, that India was able to secure cheap and diversified sources of crude oil for its energy needs. India also improved its relations with Russia, which is an important strategic partner and a counterweight to China and Asia. India also increased its influence and presence in the global oil market, especially in Europe, where it competed with other suppliers such as Saudi Arabia and Iran. India also earned foreign exchange and revenues from its export of refined products. However, what is more troubling than India's decision to buy Russian oil is Europe's reaction to it. Some European leaders and media outlets have expressed concerns that India is being used as the backdoor into Europe for Russian oil supplies. They claim that some of the refined Russian crude oil that India imports may ultimately end up in European petrol stations, either directly or indirectly. They also suggest that this would violate the spirit, if not the letter, of the sanctions on Russia, and that it would enable Moscow to circumvent the economic pressure and maintain its cash flow. But these concerns are nothing but hypocrisy and double standards from Europe. Europe itself is the biggest buyer of Russian oil and gas, and it has not stopped importing them despite the sanctions. In fact, Europe imported about 3 million barrels per day of Russian oil in May 2022, down only 18% from April. Europe also depends heavily on Russian gas for its heating and electricity needs, especially in the winter. So how can Europe accuse India of being a backdoor for Russian oil when it is itself a front door for Russian gas? How can Europe lecture India on its place in history when it is itself compromising its values and principles for cheap energy? How can Europe claim to be a leader in defending democracy and human rights when it is itself enabling a dictator who violates them? The answer is simple. Europe wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to occupy the moral high ground while enjoying the benefits of trade with Russia. It wants to impose sanctions on Russia while exempting itself from them. It wants to blame others for undermining the sanctions while ignoring its own role in doing so. It weakens the credibility and effectiveness of the sanctions regime, and it sends mixed signals to Russia and the rest of the world. It also undermines the solidarity and unity of the transatlantic alliance, which are essential for confronting Russia and other global challenges. If Europe wants to be taken seriously as a global lector and defender of democracy, it needs to stop being hypocritical and start being consistent. It needs to reduce its dependence on Russian energy and diversified sources of supply. It needs to support alternative energy projects and initiatives that would enhance its energy security and resilience. It also needs to coordinate its actions and policies with its allies and partners, especially the US and India. And most importantly, it needs to recognize that buying Russian oil and gas is not a neutral or harmless act. It is a political choice that has moral and strategic consequences. It is a choice that fuels Putin's war machine and enables his aggression. It is a choice that betrays Ukraine and other countries that are fighting for their sovereignty and freedom. So before Europe points fingers at India for buying Russian oil, it should look at itself in the mirror and ask, what is it doing to stop Putin's invasion of Ukraine? What is it doing to uphold the international order and the rule of law? What is it doing to make history proud? That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you next time.